I've been reading in John, so today we're in John 2:16, and John is kind of wordy so far, so it's a lot of detail, it's a lot of people. So what I've been trying to do as I go through it is to slow down and not really jump, towards the end or just kind of rush through paragraphs or whatever, but to really understand what Jesus is saying, to understand what's kind of going on in the scenes and the context and stuff like that. And I got this one pretty good, and pretty soon I'll do a video on how I go through my Bible studies and how I study the Bible and how I've learned to apply what I'm reading rather than just kind of skim through it just to say that I did it. So John 2:16, to those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a market." The temple was meant to be a place of worship, not a market for personal gain. So I'm reading John 2, verse 13 to 23. So basically, there was a temple there, and the temple had been there for a very long time. They said that it had been there for 46 years, but the people were using the temple as a market. So they were selling doves, they were selling ox, they were selling all types of things, right, for personal gain. So they were using the Lord's name for their own personal gain. So Jesus said, get these out of here. He's like shooing them out. He made a whip out of cords. He drove them all out the temple, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money all over and overturned their tables. To those who sold the doves, like I said, he said, "Get these out of, stop turning my Father's house into a market." I was kind of reading through this, and I was trying so hard to understand why this is important and what's the significance behind this, because I don't know, as I've been reading through this, I'm like, well, it's like a lot of talking, you know what I'm saying? It kind of seems like it's not like Matthew where it's like super cut and it's super easy to understand. It's just like, these are the rules, don't break them, you know what I'm saying? These are my commands, don't, you know what I'm saying? It's not like that. So I wanted to dive a little deeper, and I was trying so hard to understand why this is important. Why was he shooing these people out? Because in my first thought, I was like, well, they're in the house of the Lord. I don't understand what's wrong. But the true reason they were in the temple was not to worship Jesus, was not to pray, was not to spend time with God. It was to sell their merch or to sell their gear or whatever. In our terms, it'll be our hoodies or beanies or whatever it is, to sell our personal stuff for the profit, because we know that people were coming to worship. So I wrote down a couple notes, and I wanted to try to, just kind of be conscious of this as I'm going forward. The big thing about this, the reason he really kicked them out is because they weren't really worshiping God. They weren't really being a follower of Christ. And the Bible talks about our best example of worship is how we live our lives. So if how we're living is really just to kind of profit or just to kind of have that personal gain or that social status increase, then are we really doing it for the right reason? You know what I'm saying? So here's a couple notes and we'll move on. Are you using his name for personal gain? Are you doing what you want and slapping Christian on it for personal gain, profit, sales, or views? I feel like that happens a lot, but we don't know, you know what I'm saying? Nobody talks about that. Nobody says anything. We just kind of brush it off, or we're like, oh yeah, I'll support it. But are you really doing it for the love of Jesus? Are you really doing it because you really honor him and you want to be more like Jesus? Or are you doing it for that personal gain, profit, sales, views, whatever it is, social status, or just because it looks good? The last thing I wrote was, it just made me think, am I doing this because I love Jesus? Am I doing this because I really care and I want to be more like him and I have a relationship? Or am I doing it for personal gain and views or money or whatever else that may come with slapping Christian on the lifestyle that I want to live? You know what I'm saying? So